The story of the Shetland pony is a Cinderella story. Sheltie, as he is called in Great Britain, started out in life as a drudge. In the bleak and stormy Shetland Islands, north of Scotland, he was a miniature draft animal, a chunk. He looked like a drafter, with his stocky build, and he worked like one, patiently and all day long. It was Sheltie who carried bulging baskets of peat down from the hills to heat the little cottages in the glens. It was Sheltie who carried sacks of seaweed up from the shore to fertilize the tiny farm patches. And it was Sheltie who worked in front of a small wooden plow while his thrifty master spread seaweed in the furrows. Never was there another pony who filled so many needs. For long years, he furnished the only transportation on the islands. Even though he stood but 39 inches high, the people rode him wherever they went. If the cluster of shops that made up a tune was 20 miles away, or even 30, they often rode him there without stopping. Sometimes the rider was a man, hard-muscled and big. Sometimes it was a plump woman whose skirts billowed out like a feather bed, and all that showed of poor Sheltie was his pert little head and his grand sweeping tail. But Sheltie bore his burdens as patiently as he bore the weather. Drizzle, 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 wind, wind, wind. What did it matter? His wild mop of a mane made a shield for his eyes, and his long, shaggy hair made a good raincoat. Rain and windproof, he faced the brawling blast of the gales and the spindrift of the sea. Sheltie worked as a pit pony, too, in the mines of England. Here he pulled coal cars through the long, cramped passageways, his lungs breathing coal dust and hot, stuffy air, his ears deafened by the tumbling lumps of spilling coal. Some of the pit ponies never in all their lives came up for a breath of clean, fresh air, and they could never rear up and play without butting their heads against the low roofs. In fact, a pit pony forgot how to play. He just worked the days around and slept the nights around and lived and died in the pits. But at last, a happy day arrived. The mines were electrified, and there was no longer the need for a pit pony. At last, roads were carved through the rocky hills of the Shetland Islands, and trucks came to replace the pack pony. Now a happy thought came to the islanders. Why could not their husky little drafters become children's ponies the world over? For answer, they hoisted the squealing creatures aboard steamers by means of slings and cranes, and off the ponies sailed, far across the sea to America. At the end of the journey, a curious thing happened. All in a twinkling, life for Sheltie was transformed. It was as if some magic wand had touched him. The wand had 5 pudgy fingers that tipped lightly over his shaggy coat, then wriggled deep into the thick, warm fur beneath. Wide, ecstatic eyes looked long into his own. Small palms reached out to cup his muzzle. And suddenly, in the touching, it seemed that 2 long-lost creatures were restored to each other. Children everywhere claimed the tiny pony for their own, and Sheltie basked in happiness. From a workaday drudge, he became a fun-loving playmate. No door was closed to him, for he taught himself how to slide bolts, open gates, rattle latches. His long lips became expert in plucking cats from children's heads or handkerchiefs from pockets. And always these little tricks ended in a rousing game of tag. As for work, there was none. A canter over the countryside with a lightweight child on his back was no work. Or pulling a basket cart of children to a picnic. He liked picnics. To him, they meant cool streams with forget-me-nots growing in tasty clumps along the banks, and a tossed apple core to munch for dessert. As a child's playmate, Sheltie no longer needed to look like a chunk. In fact, a child could ride more securely if he were able to clasp the pony with his knees. With that in mind, breeders began to develop the American type Shetland, slimmer of barrel but no taller. And so with the years, there came to be 2 types of Shetlands, the slender American and the English draft. While the English type is usually solid black, brown, or bay, the American is often piebald. Children seem just as eager to adopt one as the other. Parents, too, are completely won by the Shetland's gentle charm, and they have found that the way to keep him gentle is to make certain he is neither overfed nor mistreated. To understand the care and keeping of our present-day Shetlands, we need to peer into their past with pony-like curiosity. Picture those lonely Shetland Islands, so lonely that when the Romans discovered them, they named the group the edge of the world. Picture the wind lashing and pounding the land so that trees grew dwarfed or not at all. And picture the rocks whipped bare of soil except for thin layers in the glens. The people had to work so hard to wrest a living that they needed a sturdy little beast to work with them. It was the Sheltie that became their farmhand. But in return for his labors, there was little the people could give. All they could do after the day's work was to throw him a bit of hay or turn him out on the coarse grass. And if the spring was slow in coming, there was often no fodder at all except heather or prickly seaweed left by the tide. But one thing the Shetlanders did give their ponies in abundance, and that was comradeship. Their low gray stone cottages had but one door, and when the wind lashed into a fury and the sea battered at the rocks and went up in funnels of spume, the man and pony hurried through the same door and found warmth and comfort around the glowing peat fire. It only needs a little imagining to see that our Shelties too will thrive on the same treatment. The simplest of fare, the daily canter, and the open door to our hearts.